Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final session of today's Leader Talk Leadership Training Challenges and Solutions, sponsored by GP Strategies, Impact, Infopro Learning, Intrepid by VitalSource, and Leadership Progress Cycle. So I am Liz Spade, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Again, before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. We've been loving seeing the interaction in the chat throughout this event, and let's finish with that same energy. So you can utilize the chat window for both questions and comments for our speaker. Dan will be addressing questions periodically during the session, so please do not hesitate to type those out throughout. And additionally, at the end of the time here with us, you will notice a short evaluation survey has popped open in another tab in your browser, and we would appreciate your thoughts on today's event. All of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include the link to the on-demand session for you to share with your team. If this is your first event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our membership, and podcasts. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms and let's continue the conversation. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dan Rust. He is the Vice President of Leadership and Organizational Development Practice at Infopro Learning. He has more than 30 years of experience helping organizational leaders navigate what is often the truest test of their leadership capabilities, leading others through the most challenging and uncertain times. And with that, Dan, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz, so much. So welcome, everybody. Let's start with the obligatory about me and about my company, just to make sure we've got that covered. So Infopro Learning, as you heard, is sponsoring this event, but also we work with a broad range of Fortune 500 and mid-sized organizations delivering leadership training globally to a broad range of audiences, broad range of leaders. And if you want to know more about Infopro Learning, you can go to infoprolearning.com and you can find those details. We do have a huge library of leadership development programs, and I spend most of my time throughout the week working with clients, identifying programs that might be a good fit for them, programs that we might want to customize or hybridize. And so I spend most of my working time having conversations with leaders about leadership development and with employees about leadership development. And that's probably my favorite time. And that's the time that actually is informing this session the most, because I do have a lot of conversations with individual employees where we talk about their real world experience of their leaders, the challenging parts of that, the good, the positive parts of that. And so in addition, I host two podcasts, the Leadership Disrupted podcast, which is a weekly podcast where I interview leaders and leadership development experts. And then the Job Smacked podcast, in which we cover the day-to-day challenges that employees are having in the workplace and provide guidance and coaching for how to address some of those challenges. So all of that is meant to say, when we talk about this topic of leading employees who are restless, who are resistant, who are what I call rewired, they're thinking differently than employees of the past. That's all coming from real world experience, real world stories, real world analysis of what's really happening. And so I wanted to start with what you see on the screen here. I think a lot of the resistance, a lot of the agitation comes from the fact that most of us are programmed to expect that our lives will progress in a linear fashion, stage by stage, step by step. We're in our 20s, certain things are going to happen or are supposed to happen. We're in our mid 20s, our late 20s, our early 30s, our mid to late 30s. And both society and media, probably our parents and the people around us, have programmed us to expect a linear progression of our life. And yet, many people are not experiencing a linear progression. They're experiencing what they perceive to be a disrupted life, where their life isn't tracking the way the lives of others are. And social media is definitely reinforcing this because when you allow yourself to be sucked into the world of social media, it seems like everyone else's life is progressing quite nicely. They're progressing along predictable stages. They're progressing in a way that makes them, happy and makes them feel accomplished. And then we wonder why why am I having these disruptions when in fact it seems like everyone else is doing just fine? But in fact, even though we're being programmed to assume that life will progress step by step, stage by stage, in a linear fashion, a little longer here, a little shorter there, but still linearly, we also then believe that that should happen with our careers. That's the way it's supposed to. You come out of university, you have your first serious job or full-time job. That should lead to a next stage, and then a next stage, and then a next stage. And so this programming that is built into most of us, the reason it creates agitation is because most of us aren't experiencing that linear progression. In fact, the programming is so deeply embedded. I'm sharing this. This is Erickson's psychological stages. And I'm going to ask you, don't look at the details because for many years, for decades, Erickson's psychological stages was viewed as the gold standard of how we should progress emotionally. And yet recent research has shown that, in fact, 60% of adults fall outside of these parameters, that this was simply someone's theory. And so, but this became deeply ingrained into our thinking that, in fact, you've probably heard that by the age of 25, our brain loses its plasticity. And so from brain development, we've arrived at the age of 25. It's absolute bunk. Some people arrive at their ultimate, brain development at the age of 20. Some arrive at 40. And so, but I just share this as an example of how throughout our lives we're sent these signals that there are stages and linear stages. There was a book in the 70s by Gail Sheehy called Passages. And Sheehy's work, it was a bestseller, it was a global bestseller. And the essence of that book was your adult life will progress through stages, and you can't enter one stage until you've completed the first stage. And so you go through development after development after development. And if your stages get mixed up, or if you're not learning the lessons you're supposed to learn or develop the way you're supposed to develop in a previous stage, you won't be able to move adequately to the next stage. It's a great concept for a book, but the research upon which his work was developed was eventually debunked. And in the world today, even though we still have this programming of linear progression in our lives and our careers, step by step by step, the reality is we're experiencing disruptions. And in fact, what I have on the screen here is just a sampling of the kinds of disruptions that can stop our progress, slow our progress, derail our progress, from career and work disruptions to financial, to family, to health. You know this to be true in your life, that it doesn't take much for suddenly you to seem like you've derailed for a period of time. It can be a relationship issue. It can be a health issue. It can be losing your job suddenly when you weren't expecting it. It can just be having a horrible boss. That alone can be so stress inducing that it can cause, again, your linear progression to be derailed. So this is just a sampling of the kinds of disruptions that can cause us to get off track, so to speak. And what I see happening today in my conversations with individuals is I think there are more disruptions than ever before. And the intensity, the depth of disruptions is greater than ever before. And it seems like disruptions come in packs of three, four, or five, where suddenly someone goes through a bitter divorce and custody battle. And at the same time, they're facing work challenges, and at the same time they come down with a health issue, or very close together. So it seems like these disruptions, they do travel in packs, so to speak. And so again, we have this vision of how our life should be, very linear, very neat. I'm using power lines as a visual metaphor. This is how we visualize how our lives should be, and we visualize how other people's lives are because everyone else around us looks like they have this very neat, linearly orderly life. And yet the reality is closer to this because of disruptions, because things happen, and sometimes these things derail us. Now, I understand that each of us has the ability to choose how we react, and some of us are able to get back on track after our life is disrupted more rapidly than others. But I think every one of us has probably at some point in life been overwhelmed by either one or a series of disruptions. And so I'd like to pause for a moment and ask you, when you think about your life in the last 10 years, how many significant disruptions have you experienced in the last 10 years that either derailed your life plan a little bit or a lot, or even if it didn't derail your plan, it was still highly disruptive? I'm going to pause. We'll give you a few moments. Pick a number. Think about your last 10 years, and we'll see what we come up with in terms of the experience of everyone on this call.
Yeah, I'll give everybody about 5 more seconds. And I will say I relate strongly with the majority.
Okay. So Liz, are you saying you're in that five or more group? Well,
Actually.
I don't even see how that's possible. You're such a young person, but again, it happens. It absolutely happens. And we end up feeling the agitation. We end up thinking it must be me because it can't be everyone else because people are not sharing their disruptions on social media. They're not posting images of their disruptions on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. They're they're posting the good stuff, the happy stuff. In fact, it seems like if you aren't really discerning, it can seem like everybody has a happy, lovely life. They're just progressing rapidly. Everyone has 7% body fat. Everyone has a partner or a spouse that respects and loves them. Everyone has kids that are bright and smart and articulate and love them. Everyone has pets that are incredibly well trained and don't ever do anything wrong. Or if they do something wrong, it's the kind of cute stuff that you can post online and everyone laughs along with you. So again, social media tends to reinforce that image of a linear life being the quote unquote normal life. And now I've got on the list because everything I listed before, those were personal disruptions, things that happen to individuals. What you see on the screen here are the macro disruptions that happen to all of us. The increasing speed and complexity of business. Those of you who are of an age where you can remember what business was like in the 70s and 80s, just think for a moment about the speed and complexity of business back then and the speed and complexity today. It's like the water has been heating up slowly, and we've not necessarily realized how much it's heating up, but in fact, it's much faster. It is a lot more complicated. Um, Seven smartphones. We have 724 access to smartphones and social media, information and misinformation coming at us again and again and again. Generative AI and technology. In fact, I'm going to highlight the first few. All of these things are impacting us, and so you when you ask yourself, when the vast majority of our employees have this expectation or had this expectation for a linearly progressive life. And yet, as they entered the adult world of work, and they go into their first job, their second job, their third job, suddenly it starts to fade away, this sense that life is going to progress the way I thought it was going to progress. And if you're wondering then, if you're a leader and you're wanting to know, well, how do I deal with this workforce that they want more, they want faster, they are restless, they're not respectful or in the way that I was taught to be respectful. They're a little edgy, they're, they're challenging in ways that I don't quite understand. Well, this to a large degree is where it's springing from. They are in fact restless. They are wondering what's going to happen with their lives. So I'm going to ask you in the chat, as you think about how this impacts the behaviors of the people that you are leading, any comment that you have, any thoughts that you might have in terms of how this impacts their behaviors, I'd love you to share in the chat regarding what kinds of behaviors you see based upon employees who are having these disruptions, many of which they're not sharing with you. You don't know oftentimes that all of these things are happening. But what thoughts might you have on how this impacts the behavior of the people that you lead? Absolutely. Ashley, changed mood, anxiety. I I love that word agitation because I think it speaks to it. Absenteeism, changed performance, that sense that they don't care, when in fact they want to care. They do. They want to work hard, but they feel disconnected or they seem disconnected. I, you know, I'll admit, the first time I had a young 20-something worker come to me telling me she was burned out, my brain exploded at first, thinking, "Oh, come on, how burned out can you be at 23 years old?" But in fact, she's 23 in today's world, not 23 in 1970 or 1980. And what I have to remind myself regularly is that this is the world they grew up in. Social media has made all of these things front and center for them. Many of our younger people grew up in a world where they are continuously exposed via social media to children starving in Gaza, to conflict in Rwanda, to challenges here, to challenges there. They've been exposed to far more than you or I were probably exposed to at a similar age. And so, right or wrong, real or not, fact-based or not, they've evolved in a different world. They've grown in a different world, and it does affect them. And so, if we're going to be a little empathetic with them as leaders, I think we just have to recognize they've been brewing in a different pot than the pot that we brewed in when we were growing and evolving. So, a couple of very specific behaviors that result from this overall sense of the world. Number one is every one of you is under what I call the leadership microscope. Now, this has always been true. It's always been true that people pay very close attention to what leaders do, to what leaders say, but the power of that microscope has definitely dialed up. When people are feeling uncertain and anxious, when people are feeling like I don't know, who I can trust. I don't know what I can trust. I don't know where I should invest my energy. Where do I give my heart and soul over to a business, an endeavor, a project, a leader? When people are feeling anxiety about that, the power of their microscope goes way up, and they notice the most minute details. On virtual meetings, they'll notice if the leader laughs at one person's joke, but then glosses over someone else's comment. They'll notice you and your work habits, whether they'll ever say anything about it or not. If you're one of those leaders who has a habit of showing up late for meetings or has a habit of canceling every third meeting because you're just so busy, because unpredictable things happen. If you're a leader who has a habit of canceling the monthly one-on-one with an employee, where that's the meeting that was dedicated to just catching up as humans, one-to-one, human to human. Let's talk about you and your career and your ambition. If that meeting gets scheduled every week or every month, because at least once a month, you should be having that kind of meeting with each of your employees. Once a month, you should be having a non-KPI, a non-OKR, a non-project, a non-performance, one-on-one, human-to-human meeting. We all know we should be doing it, so we schedule those meetings. If you're one of those leaders who cancels those or cancels half of them or a third of them, again, because you're just overwhelmed with things that are more important, those things get noticed. And you see on the list here, things that get noticed. They're paying such close attention to you. Sometimes we forget as leaders that we are under the microscope. We think because they're not confronting us with it. They're not coming to you and saying, "Hey, I notice you tend to cut off Joe, or you tend to not really align with Joe's ideas, whatever he shares, but you really like Betsy's ideas or whoever." Um, those things do get noticed. Who you align with, who you ignore, what you do, what you don't do, how closely you keep to your schedule, how well you hold yourself accountable. They'll notice if you're holding yourself accountable. So it's important to understand that in this kind of environment, that microscope power is even higher. And that leads to the next behavior change. So behavior change number one is the power of the leadership microscope is even higher. They're noticing the minute details. They are noticing what you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say, what you what you deliver, what you don't deliver. They notice your communication. They may even, overinterpret when or even misinterpret. What the power of that microscope is pretty high. And that leads then to putting on of masks. I mean, again, I'm going to say the leadership microscope has always existed. It's just more intense. The same is true with masks. We've always worn masks. We all wear masks. And very few of us are born so comfortable in our own skin that we just go out into the world and say, "Hey, here's who I am. No mask at all. I just am the exact same person with every single person that I interact with." Now, maybe you on this webinar are amongst the few who are so evolved that you never wear a mask. But in fact, I will tell you, your employees do because they know they have expectations. They want to be the kind of employee that you seem to be looking for. If there's a particular employee who you really you laugh at their jokes, you like their ideas, you give them all the verbal and nonverbal feedback that lets people know, yeah, this is the kind of person I really like. People will start to adopt that kind of mask. They'll start to evolve toward being that kind of person because you're communicating to them, this is good. This is what I respond well to. So we all do wear masks. It's just that the masks become bigger, more powerful, more prevalent. And so your employees may be going through a lot of things. In fact, I would suppose they're going through a lot of things that you never get exposed to. You don't know that they've had a breakup. You don't know that they've had a health issue. You don't know their aging parent is causing them to have to, stay up later or get up earlier, is creating financial stress for them. There's a lot about them that you probably do not know. And quite possibly the reverse is true as well. There's a lot going on with you that they may not be aware of, even though that microscope is on high power. So we all wear masks. We all hide parts of ourselves. The majority of us do. There are those rare leaders who are so comfortable in their own skin, so comfortable sharing their own vulnerabilities, so comfortable being who they authentically are that they don't wear masks. Now, most of those leaders, if you ask them, how did you get to be like this? Most of them will say it's a process. Most of them will say they had to evolve toward this. Most of them didn't just start out that way. Becoming one of those authentic leaders who is comfortable in their own skin, who shares who they authentically are. It's the kind of leader we yearn for today. It's the kind of leader we aren't seeing very many examples of today. And we'll talk about that just a little bit more in a few minutes. But masks lead to what I call the leadership bubble. And the leadership bubble, when you have employees around you who are watching you carefully, but they're also wearing masks, they're also basically putting a good face forward. They're essentially not comfortable sharing with you information that you don't want to hear, but they're very comfortable sharing with you information that you do want to hear. They're very comfortable validating uh, the positive, validating that you're doing a great job, validating that your latest strategy is fabulous, your latest strategy is amazing. Um, they're probably not comfortable coming to you and saying, interesting strategy. I'm not sure that we're ready to execute on that strategy yet. So there's a tendency, and again, we are all different, as leaders. Some of us have big, thick bubbles around us, and people just do not approach us, do not bring bad news to us. So I think we all know leaders like that, where you do not want to be the messenger delivering unwelcome news, because the messenger is going to be shot. Um, and and so there's this natural progression of masks leading to bubbles. And then if you are a leader who lacks self-awareness and doesn't really understand this bubble that surrounds you, because if you are self-aware, you can do things to minimize the bubble. You can never make it go away completely, because to the degree that you have control over other people's lives, over other people's careers, they're always going to be somewhat cautious, somewhat thoughtful about how they communicate with you. But if you as a leader are not particularly aware of the bubble that surrounds you, it does lead to blind spots. It leads to you not seeing everything there is to be seen, because people aren't sharing all the information with you. Now, you may be a very smart person. I can't tell you the number of examples I've seen of really, really bright leaders, very competent leaders who have blind spots because people are being careful. People are being too careful around them. And so the leader really doesn't understand what's not working and why it's not working. They don't understand the less than optimal results and what drove those less than optimal results. They don't really get that very practical, challenging feedback that they need to understand how are things really working, not how do I want things to work, and not how do I envision things working. Steve Jobs was known for creating basically an alternate reality. He would, in fact, they called it his reality distortion field, where he could bend reality to what he wanted it to be. If an engineer said, "We just can't make the phone that thin. We just can't make the phone that responsive," he would not accept that as an answer, and he would find a way to bend reality to his will. But a lot of that is that we hear, it's hindsight, it's second guessing. The reality is you are not Steve Jobs. I'm not Steve Jobs. And I think probably the truth is Steve Jobs wasn't Steve Jobs, the Steve Jobs that we read about in the books and the movies and the videos, etc. So yes, Steve had to some degree this reality distortion field, but it was also romanticized by Walter Isaacson in his book, Steve Jobs. The reality is that you, as a leader, need to see the reality that your people see, so that you don't have blind spots, so that you see all the brutal, uncomfortable, messy stuff, as well as the nice, beautiful, you know, uh, good stuff as well. If you don't, then that leads to what I call blind pitching, where leaders pitch out ideas, pitch out strategies, pitch out projects, pitch out things, and they don't even realize that they're pitching blind, because they're pitching based upon the vision that they have of how the world is. But the employees are not coming to them to say, the world is slightly different than this world that you actually see. And particularly in today's world, with employees who are under the kind of stress and anxiety that they're under, blind pitching it happens a lot more frequently than you might think. And then imagine this: if you are one of those employees, you're not consciously saying, well, I'm not going to give the leader this information, even though he or she really needs it. You're just being yourself. But this accumulative effect of leaders having these blind spots causes them sometimes to come forward with visions or executional projects or ideas or things that they propose that maybe aren't as well thought through as they think they are. They pitch these things out, and then they wonder why employees don't respond. They wonder why employees aren't as enthusiastic about these things, aren't as engaged, and they wonder, why can't I get them to care more? Why can't I get them to work more? Why can't I get them to own it? Why can't I get them to take accountability? Why do I feel like I'm Sisyphus continuously pushing things uphill, uphill, uphill? Well, it may be that the rock that you're trying to push uphill is problematic. It may be that employees are saying, I just don't get why he's doing this. I don't get why she's pushing it this way. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't work for me. Now, that may be a combination of the rock that you're choosing to push, the hill that you're choosing to push it up, the way that you're communicating. It can be a combination of a lot of things. But in fact, in today's world where there is so much disruption, where employees are feeling the pain and anxiety of disruption, it does behoove us as leaders to first understand that and understand that this is a more difficult world. And so employees, while they may not always come to you and say, I gotta let you know, I just am not buying this project. I don't see the reality of it. I don't see it as making sense. They may not feel comfortable unless you create an environment where they can come forward, where they do feel the psychological safety required. And that's obviously pretty rare for most employees. So I'm going to ask you during times of a disruption, and you saw that list of macro disruptions that we had on the screen. We are living and working in disrupted times. I know you know that. We have political disruption, social disruption, generational disruption, cultural disruption. In challenging times, if you had to choose which set of competencies, and I've got 6 of them listed on the screen, and each of these characteristics is actually, of course, its own set of competencies. There are numerous contributing competencies to this. But if you had to choose which of these is most important during disruptive times, and I know this is not an easy question, we'll give you a few extra seconds to choose because first of all, there is no right or wrong answer, but I would love to see, where you come down in terms of what is most important. There we go. I'll tell you again, I don't think there necessarily is a right or wrong answer, but I love seeing empathy lead the pack because I think if you do have well-informed empathy, I think that can lead to a lot of the other behaviors that we want to or need to see. But in fact, if you ask um, employees what they're looking for, probably the first thing they'll say, and Ashley, you said competence and character. Probably, that comes from Covey's Speed to Trust program. And competence and character, if you ask employees, they'll probably first say competence. If someone is leading you um, through dangerous territory, if they're leading you through a dangerous jungle, the first thing you want to know is that they're competent. Just, don't let me die on this dangerous journey. And then if you can add character to that, all the better. But sometimes they don't feel their leaders are competent because, again, going back to blind spots, their leaders are not operating with full information. So we live in this world of no obvious answers. There are numerous ways to get something done. Leaders are challenged trying to address all of the weight that's on their shoulders. And so I'm going to ask you in the chat if something occurs to you to answer this question. During times of disruption, what kind of leaders do we yearn for? I mean, I have my own thoughts, and I'm gonna type in a couple things in the chat as well because this is one of the questions I ask almost every employee when I'm having one-on-one confidential employee conversations. I always get to this question. I just say to them, what kind of leader do you yearn for right now? And in their own ways, I'm going to type something down. Um, they see me. Now, they don't necessarily use that phrase. What they want to know is that you, as a leader, you do see me, you know me, you value me, you listen to me. I am not just a cog in the system. And whether you are my direct report supervisor or you're an executive 3 levels up, I can sense when I step into an elevator and there's an executive there, I can sense whether he's or she is the kind of person who they may not exactly know me, but if they do care about me, if they do have that empathy, it comes through in the way they interact. It comes through in the way they ask questions. There is a sense that employees are looking for leaders who are who who are more, you've got a lot of great characteristics. Yes, compassionate, competent, authentic, honest. But let me ask you, isn't it kind of a shame that that isn't just assumed? Isn't it a bit of a shame that people even have to say that? That, yeah, I wish for this, but that's the truth today, that there is a sense of, I don't matter, I don't count. I'm here to produce my OKRs or my KPIs. I'm here to produce. I'm here to contribute. I'm here to do a job. But if I leave, I'll be replaced by another person who's here to do a job. That is the overarching sentiment that I hear from employees today, and it is a shame. Now, I should not have to tell any of you how to be more compassionate, how to be more caring, how to express. But I will say the phrase that comes to me often is employees are looking for individuals who will lead deeper and wider, meaning they will go deeper in terms of their relationships, but also deeper in terms of their competency, deeper in terms of their ability to drive the business as well as engage with the individuals, the humans that are within the business. And it's a lot. What I like about this phrase, leading deeper and wider, is it feels like a lot because most leaders, if you ask them right now, they will say, I'm already working 60 hours a week. I'm already working 65. I'm already responding to text messages in the evenings or on weekends. I'm tap dancing as fast as I can. And if I feel like I'm dancing as fast as I can, and someone comes along and says, we need you to lead deeper, or we need you to lead wider, we need you to be more, it can feel overwhelming. And so suddenly now you've got agitation amongst your employees and agitation amongst the leaders who are leading the employees. So I'm going to take the last 5 minutes because I know we're about to wrap up. And I know this is a lot to try cover in 45 minutes. We're trying to solve a big, big problem in 45 minutes or less, and that's just not going to happen. But I think I can clue you into a few specific things that you can do to make things a bit better. And then if you want more, I would say either listen to the podcasts or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I always have time for these kinds of conversations and to talk people through what's happening to them individually or what's happening in their organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So what do I mean by leading deeper and wider? First, recognize when it comes to communication, you can probably assume that communication skills are the core capability of every leader. So in the world that we're trying to communicate in now, we're overwhelmed by information and disinformation. We're overwhelmed by 724 phones. I love the comment, Kathy. That's fantastic. I In this world of overwhelm, how do you communicate with clarity? We could spend an entire day talking about communicating with clarity, but I'm just going to give you a few tiny tips um, because of the time constraint, obviously. First of all, think about who you're communicating to and ask yourself, why does this matter to them? And how do I frame this in a way where it matters to them? I know it sounds overly simple, but so often we communicate things, and if we don't pause for a moment to say, okay, this is why it makes sense to me. Let me flip it around. Why would it make sense or why would it matter to them? And then ask yourself, is there a shorter, simpler way to communicate this? Is this the right medium for the communication? Maybe sending a blast email to all of my employees is not the right thing. Maybe there's a different type of communication method or medium. It might be a town hall. It might be a video. It might be an infographic. Again, just taking a moment to think, is this 4-paragraph email the right medium for the information that I'm looking to deliver? And then finally, if there's a way to visualize what you're looking to deliver, there's a lot of power in taking a message, simplifying it down to its core, and then creating a visual, whether it's a graph visual or a data visual or just some other type of visualization. There are a lot of ways to communicate what you're trying to communicate with visuals, with photos, with graphics, etc. And just taking a moment to ask yourself the question is valuable enough, because if you ask yourself, at least ask yourself the question, you likely will find more of the Occam's razor path to that communication. What's the shortest path to getting them either the information or other intent that they need for that particular communication? So basically, find ways to communicate more by saying less, writing less, reducing the cognitive load on. I have a couple of friends who I still see their leadership communications, and even though they've gotten some gentle guidance from me, they still send out these lengthy messages, and then they bury the lead. They've got, the core of their messages down in paragraph 3, down in paragraph 4, when in fact I will say to them, cut out the first 3 paragraphs. Your core message is right there. But maybe that doesn't feel to them like it has the gravitas, the weight, if I just send out 3 sentences versus these voluminous um, uh, messages. AI leadership, um, of course, is a massive topic. I will say to you as leaders, to truly be leading AI within your organization, it's probably going to take more time from you than you want it to. It's not going to be as simple as, hey, I'm going to watch a YouTube video and then I get it, or I'm going to tell them what to do. You probably are going to have to spend many, many hours internalizing what AI is, how large language models work, what they do, what they don't do. Now, there is plenty of information available. There's no shortage of AI training and AI leadership training. Just go to YouTube. There's plenty there, but it's going to take time. And what I'm finding with many leaders now is they're shoving that off to the technical folks or the IT staff or in some other way, because they feel a little uncomfortable at first. Um, but you're just going to have, now, many of you on this call maybe have already done this, but I just think AI leadership going a bit deeper and a bit wider in terms of AI is going to be incredibly important. And Liz, we're not going to have time for Q&A at the end because I'm going to squeeze every last drop out of my 45 minutes because I've got a few more topics coming up that I don't want to give up on these.
Go for it.
Engagement leadership. The reason I use the word engagement, being totally transparent with you, is because suddenly DEI has become a dirty word. Suddenly woke is a dirty word. And I understand why. I understand why, and I blame it on all of us because for a long time, DEI practitioners held up diversity, equity, inclusion as this raises up these groups, not necessarily diminishes these. But you can imagine if I'm raising up based on gender, sexuality, race. There are others, middle-aged white men, for example, who may feel like, well, if you're raising them up, you are inherently, if the tide is rising, but my boat stays the same, I'm going to be sunk. And I don't think that was intentional, but I think we ended up creating this anti-woke backlash. And yet at the same time, we have work environments. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone wants to be included. The young 20 somethings and the middle-aged overweight white guys as well. And I can say that because I speak as a member of that club. And so you as a leader have to accept that engagement, belonging, inclusion is part of your job, and making sure that everyone has that sense that I'm seen, I belong, I have a place, I'm valued, including the middle-aged white guys, everybody. So we want to talk about diversity in terms of neurodiversity, family diversity, education diversity, life diversity, economic diversity. We want to bring everyone into the tent because that's the work environment of the future. Remote leadership requires so much more of leaders. It is hard because it requires intentionality. In the past, if you're not in a remote position, if you come into the office and you can see all of your employees, you feel the buzz, you feel the energy, you feel the nonverbal cues. Remote leadership, you don't get any of that. But as a leader, you are still accountable for connecting, creating that sense of connection. And it takes more from you. It takes more energy. It takes more time. It takes more intentionality. And then final thought, I'm going back to this screen. Think about all these macro disruptions. Apologies to the Game of Thrones fans on this call, but winter is coming. This world that is approaching us, things are not turning around. Things are progressing in a not so great direction. There are lots and lots and lots of disruptions. So when we talk about developing the skills to lead restless employees, the skills to lead resistant employees, the skills to lead rewired employees who think differently than employees of the past. It's going to be worth it for you to invest the time to master this because these are the employees of the future. There is no return to normal. We are not in Kansas anymore. We are not returning back to the way things were 20 years ago or even pre-pandemic. So winter is coming. I'm going to recommend a book. There's a book from, I think, the 90s by Andrew Grove called Only the Paranoid Survive. It's a great book. It helps you understand how to look at your business from the standpoint of positive paranoia, like well-informed positive paranoia. And then finally, for those of you who are interested in self-reflection, I normally end with self-reflection because I want to first embed a lot of these thoughts before you start self-reflecting. What I'm going to do is, Liz, am I able to upload a document to the chat? While Liz is doing her close, because Liz is about to close things out, I'm going to upload a document to the chat, which is just a leadership self-reflection document. It's not a quick document. It's a long document. It's meant for deep and wide self-reflection. With that said, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to turn things back over. And I apologize for the last 2 minutes where I definitely took up more than my allotted time, Liz. Thank you.
No worries. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really therapeutic. And honestly, I hope everyone else felt the same way. So I really appreciate it, Dan. I love hearing you speak. So thank you so much. So with that, yes,
All
for
right.
everyone else, I do want to say a big thank you to all of our dynamic speakers. And I see your document. I think you sent it to just host and panelists. So I would just send it one more time.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. This is my bad.
I was
Okay.
making sure everybody
Yep.
gets their document.
I'll do it while you're talking.
Perfect. But yeah, we had amazing dynamic speakers and our sponsors, GP Strategies, Impact, Infopro Learning, Intrepid by Vital Source, and Leadership Progress Cycle. So thank you again. Is there anything else you'd like to say though, Dan, before we say our goodbyes though? I do want you to say one last thing.
So honestly, this happens every time. I get going and then it's like the engine doesn't want to stop. So let me just say, connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever, all the socials, any of the socials. Happy to continue the dialogue and conversation. Obviously, I love not just talking about this, but I love listening about this as well and hearing your stories. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I highly recommend to connect with Dan. That was beautifully said. Thank you so much. But yeah, for everyone else, all of our sessions are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CBTM. So I am going to type in my email in the chat. Send an email to me and I will send you those codes as soon as I can. And additionally, I would love to see you in Milwaukee this fall for the 2025 Training Industry Strategy Summit. Collaborate with peers, industry experts, and thought leaders as you build, refine, and future-proof your organizational learning strategies. And I'm a little biased, but this is more than a conference. It's truly created, built with the intent of a working session for learning leaders who want to align learning with business outcomes. So please learn more at summit.trainingindustry.com. Additionally, lead and direct change by making agile transformation a top priority in your organization. Innovate and align recruiting and onboarding process to build a strong learning culture. And you can obtain the competitive advantage by earning your agile certification for HR and L&D. Again, one last reminder about that survey that will pop open another tab in your browser. When you exit, we would greatly welcome your feedback. Thank you all for joining us again today. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. And until next time, I am Liz. I hope you have a great day, a great week, great weekend, And I hope to see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.